really have time to deal with when I was here before. And so we're going to talk about some issues. I call it next level leadership. Well, everybody's a leader. We know that. And especially when you come to the point of understanding it's not about titles or business cards or what size office you have. It's about function. And some have described leadership as influence, nothing more, nothing less. And that's true, basically. We're all influencing somebody. As a matter of fact, I read a statistic once that said, in a normal lifespan, which seems to be getting shorter now for men, it may be getting shorter after that last little thing I read, but in a normal lifespan, we are influenced by or influence 10,000 people. I can't prove that because, well, I'm still living and I don't know. I haven't taken a tab, but I don't discount it because every day we have an opportunity to be influenced by others. We have an opportunity to influence others, and we're all in leadership at some level because people are watching what we do. They're listening to what we say, and they want to know, what kind of leader are you really? And so one of the first things I think, this is just me, could be wrong, but one of the first things I think that we need to deal with tonight is what I call, up on the board, all God's children have problems. How do you deal with problems? And next level leaders come to understand two things. Number one, everybody has problems, challenges, difficulties, things that we face in a thing called LIFE. It's called life. You say, well, I don't have any problems. Well, I don't know how to say this, but either you're not doing anything. Somebody said, I don't like to be criticized. And you know the old saying, well, if you do nothing and say nothing, then you probably will still be criticized for doing nothing and saying nothing. So you're not going to escape problems. We all have them. We all have challenges. We all have difficulties. Let me read you. And by the way, just so you'll know, if you've been here when I've taught before, I carry this big notebook. Don't be afraid of it. It's your friend. It keeps me on track, and I'm going to refer to it tonight because I want to, I want to be specific about our time. I want to let you go on time. I'm not going to keep you here all night. We have 2 sessions with a break tonight. We'll have 3 in the morning. We're finished at noon, and we're done. We're not going to stay all day, but I'm going to get these things out to you. Maybe there's some things you can pick up. Normally I have a workbook with this, but just make notes. Is that okay? Let me read you this. It's an old story. It illustrates the point. An old farmer plowed around a large rock in one of his fields for years. He had broken several plowshares and a cultivator on it, and after breaking another plowshare, one fall, and remembering all the trouble the rock had caused him through the years, he finally determined to do something about it. When he put his crowbar under the rock, he was surprised to discover that it was only about 6 inches thick and he could easily break it up. As he was carting away, he had a smile, remembering all the trouble the rock had caused him and how easy it would have been to get rid of it sooner. There's often a temptation to bypass small obstacles when we're in a hurry to get a large problem solved. We simply don't want to stop and take the time to deal with it now. Like the old farmer, we just plow around it. Many times when we're faced with multiple problems, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, how to deal with it, or at least some suggestions, we usually tell ourselves, well, I'll leave that old rock alone and I'll come back and deal with it later, only to discover that the rock, in the case of a problem, has only gotten bigger. Many times we want to avoid confrontation and we want to avoid problems simply because, hopefully, if we leave it alone long enough, maybe it'll just go away. I don't know about you guys, and by the way, this will be a little bit interactive maybe in the morning. I want you to talk to me and we can discuss that. I've only been at this 54 years. I know more about what not to do from hard lessons than what to do sometimes. So I'm no expert. I've just lived a long time and been in ministry for 54 years and dealt with people in seminars like this all over the world. And I know that many times we try to figure out a way to avoid problems. I know I have. Hopefully, if we close our eyes and whistle through the graveyard, that we won't be bothered by it any longer. Never seems to work that way for me. I don't know about you. I used to call this session How to Be a Hero in Your Organization, or How to Be a Hero in Your Ministry. You know how to be a hero in your organization, whether it's a ministry or a business? Be a problem solver. Because I guarantee you, when you become a problem solver instead of someone that makes problems, people will hunt you down to get your input and help on how to solve problems. Now, I understand. I know a lot of times people come to us and they want us to solve their problem for them. And I fell into that trap because I really spent a lot of time studying about it and trying to apply principles, and became known in a certain circle as a problem solver, and my phone would ring constantly with problems that others were having. And it would usually go like this on a Friday afternoon. I'd get a call from someone, and they said, listen, I've got this problem, and I want to know how you're going to solve it. You're the problem solver guy. I want to know how you're going to solve it, and I'll check with you next week, usually on a Friday afternoon. So they dump this on you. It's called putting the monkey on your back. They just took it off of theirs, and they can have a peaceful weekend knowing that somebody else is going to deal with the problem. So I learned the hard way of saying, I will help you with your problem. I will do what I can with your problem, but I can't make your problem my problem, but I can help you. Does that make sense? Become a problem solver in your organization, and you'll be known as someone, for lack of a better term, a can-do person that says, hey, I will help you. Because I've come to the conclusion that every problem has a solution. If it doesn't have a solution, it becomes a fact of life. Learn to live with it. Some problems can't be solved. I have a problem sometimes when I get on a plane. I cannot reach all the way inside the overhead compartment. You say, well, why is that? We'll figure it out. I'm vertically challenged in that department. I can open it, but I can't reach all the way to the back to pull anything out, so I've had to improvise. Now, that's a problem. Now, I could carry a step stool with me on the plane, but I doubt they'd let me keep it. No, it's a fact of life. It's just something I deal with. Now, I can grumble and complain about things like that, but it won't do any good. It's not going to change the circumstances. That's a problem. I can't do anything about my eye color or where I was born. I can't do anything about who my parents were. I can't do anything about the way I was raised. Now, I can go all day long and talk about problems and being a victim and all those things. But you come to the point of saying, I'm not going to be defined by that anymore, so I don't consider that a problem in my life. I'm just going to consider it a fact of reality, but I know the Lord can give me the grace and the power to overcome those things. That's not the kind of problems I'm talking about. Next level leaders become problem solvers. Not unlike the man that went to the bookstore and he saw a book that said, for $29.95, you can buy this book, the big sign that says, this will help you fix 50% of your problems. So he bought two. Don't be like that guy. Don't be like the person that does that. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of practical things, and then we'll take a break. Let me give you where most people turn for help with a problem. You might be interested. 56% turn to family members. 43% turn to friends. 38% turn to the Bible. 22% other books. 16% to a priest or a minister. 7% think they can buy tapes. That will help them. 6% to a boss or an employer, and only 4% to a counselor. Many times we look at other people. Here's the way it goes. Again, being in church ministry for so long, it goes like this. We look at people and we say, boy, if I could just be like them. Because they don't appear to have any problems. Look at them. They're all together Sunday morning. Man, they're dressed great. They drive a beautiful car. They have wonderful houses. They're just wonderful. If I could just be like them. Here's what I've discovered. You walk in someone's shoes for about, an hour without all the fancy trappings of meeting together on a Sunday morning or Monday morning at the office and discover this truth. Everybody faces something. That's not an issue if. It's an issue of when and what will you do about it. Someone wrote this, and I copied it down because it made sense to me, because we all know this is true. The words of Paul Harvey, who said that in times like these, remember, it's always helpful to remember there have always been times like these. So we want to blame the culture that we're in. We want to blame the times that we live in and say, boy, if we could just go back to the 50s and the 60s and Andy Griffin and all those Father Knows Best and the Dick Van Dyke Show. Yeah, those were wonderful growing up days, sure, for those of y'all that are old enough to remember. Personally, I'm not, but the fact of the matter is every generation has its own set of problems that we deal with. Some seem to be a little more exacerbated, but you see, our lives are not determined by who's in the White House. It's determined by who lives inside of us. Necessity is the mother of invention. I'm going to skip that because you already know that's true. Let me get to the heart of the matter. Let me get you to write down a few things about problems. You ready? Number one. Say, I'm ready. All right. Number one. You're going to love this. Make problems your friends. Not your enemies. Can you see that? Do I need to move? I know, I'm left-handed. Go ahead. Donna said if she knew I was left-handed, she would have canceled the event. There you go. Make problems your friends, not your enemies. The Bible, and I'm going to use the Bible. I could use a lot of other resources, but I like to use the Bible. Is filled with men and women, in spite of limitations, overcame great problems. I'll get to it in a minute. Can I give you something that I try to do when faced with multiple problems at one time? Have you ever had many of them just come at you? I mean, it could be at home, it could be on the job, it could be with family relationships, and they all come at you. Don't make fun. I'm about to draw. Here's the way it looks to me. Put a frown on this guy. Frown. Are you getting it? They're all coming at you. They're all lined up. They're all frowning. They're problems. Give him some arms. And they're all lined up in front of you. And they stand there and stare at you. Wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And some of them are bigger than other ones. I didn't do the giants. But the big ones, the big boys, they're really big. And they're ugly and they're mean. And they wake you up at, I know, isn't it terrible? They wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning and remind you individually what the problems are. And your mind's going nuts trying to figure out what to do. Here's what I've learned. Can't always do it. I don't always do it. I try to do it. When they're lined up in front of me, I make them stand single file. And if I might come over here, and let's pretend this is the big one. And I go with the big one first. And I can't see behind him because I make these little guys line up, and I deal with him first. I tell these guys, stand in line. Take a ticket. When I finish with this one, I will deal with that one. When I finish with that one, and they're all standing behind him, I can't see anything but the big boy. Anybody getting what I'm saying? Because if you line them up in front of you like a formation, and you're staring at these guys, what are you going to do with it? Well, I'll do a little bit over here, a little bit over here, and a little bit over here. I'll try to tackle that one when I can. Maybe this afternoon I can get to that. I'm not talking about having a to-do list. I'm talking about a priority list for problems, because we all have them. And so we make this guy disappear. We deal with him. And then we tell the next guy, step up, pal. You're next. I'll deal with you next. Whatever the problem is. Because what the enemy wants us to do is get so focused on all of them in volume that we forget the fact that we can actually determine which problems we're going to deal with. A next level leader understands there's going to be problems, but a next level leader also understands that not only can we become problem solvers for others, we can become problem solvers for ourselves. Because sometimes we get so wrapped up, now watch it, we get so wrapped up in other people's problems, we tend to let our own issues go by the wayside and not deal with them until that rock that farmer kept plowing around becomes so big we can't plow around it anymore, and now we got to figure out how to blow that thing up. And in doing so, many times we blow ourselves up with it. Let me give you some examples. Write them down. Noah was a leader. I call him a quintessential next level leader who did what was right even though nobody believed him. Can you imagine? You know the story of Noah. You've heard sermons and lessons on it. But he's one of my heroes. Wrote a book about him. I did. Called The Dream Doer. Wasn't my title. I had another title, What to Do on a Rainy Day. In an ark full of smelly animals. But the publisher changed the title, and I didn't fuss about it. I don't care. Call it anything you want. The content's what I care about. Can you imagine? Some say about 120 years, it had not rained on the earth. The dew came up. You know how God watered stuff. And so I can imagine that he's at the construction site and people are walking by. Now, I've heard preachers say, you know, he was maligned and he was cursed. I can't find that in the Bible. I think he was a curiosity. They might have muttered. That's a combination of murder and murmur. They might have muttered under their breath. But there he is out there. What are you building? A what? A boat? What do we need a boat for? What is a boat? A boat? That's a strange word. A boat? What are you going to do when you're finished? I don't know. I'm just being obedient. He had a problem. He had a problem of others not understanding his assignment. He had a problem that those around him, probably even in his own family, God talked to him. And every time God talked to him, read it in Genesis 6, 5, and 6. Every time God talked to him, the Bible says he did according to the word of the Lord. In spite of the fact, you know he must have been ridiculed behind his back. You know. Probably some of his own family said, you know, I'm worried. He's getting on up there, and I'm just a little concerned that he might need some help. Because all they can hear is out there is the banging and the sawing and the stuff and dragging in materials, and the construction site is huge. Why are you doing this again? God told you? Wait a minute, you telling me God talked to you? God spoke to you? Was it audible? Really, tell us how he did that. Did he write you an email? You know, how did he send you a text? How did he do that? I just know that I know. Somebody asked me one time, does God talk to you? I said, sometimes. Is it an audible voice? I said, no, it's much louder than that. Because when he wants to communicate, he doesn't stutter. And he knows how to get the word impressed into you. And so there's Noah, doing something nobody's ever done before. about ready to see something happen that had never happened before. So whatever people think about a moral judgment on God destroying the earth and all that, I'm not getting into it. I just like Noah. He's one of my heroes because he was a next level leader who did what he was supposed to do in his assignment in spite of the problems around him. Can you imagine? One chapter in the book I wrote is called Shoveling and Sailing in the Middle of a Flood. I did some research on how much it took to shovel the waste of all those animals. It was a lot every day. And yet, in spite of all that, he trusted God. That's the kind of leader I want to follow. How about you? Number 2, Abraham. These are all people you know. Abraham demonstrated that leaders are not afraid to embrace the unknown. God said, hey, Abraham, Genesis 11 and 12. First, he spoke to his daddy and said, take your family and move there, about 1,100 miles. They stopped in Haran. And the Bible says at the end of chapter 11, and dwelt there, which means they stopped. It was much later after his daddy died that God came to him and said, now pack your family up and complete the journey and the assignment I gave to your father. Where am I going? I'll tell you on the way. Or maybe I'll tell you when you get there. Well, Lord, how am I going to know? Just obey. Do you know one of the hardest things to do is to obey God when you don't know all the answers? To obey God when you don't know the outcome? To obey God when you don't even know the destination? Pack up your stuff and move to a land of which I will tell you. Okay, well, how are you going to do that? But he obeyed. So Abraham was the next level leader because he determined that he was going to obey in spite of not having all the answers. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I like to have the answers. It goes like this. Lord, I know you really are impressing on me to do that, but I'd really like more details, please. Yeah. And I've come to the conclusion, Lord and I were talking about it just today, we talk about it a lot, of walking in the light that you have. If you want more, walk in what you know right now. Because a lot of times, I want to look down the road. I want to say, well, how's this going to look? How's this going to work out? How will I know when I've arrived at that destination? And the Lord says, just start right where you are. Well, Lord, I want to move up in the organization. I want to move up in ministry. I want to move up. And the Lord says, what are you doing right now to obey me in the light that I've given you? What if Abraham had said, Lord, I'm not sure about this. Now, we kind of like it here. We stopped. We got our family settled. We like the schools. We got good malls. The houses are good. The housing prices are fair. We kind of like it. So I'm going to need a little bit more detail here before I uproot my family. You wouldn't be reading about the man of faith that Abraham became. Because I believe, this is my opinion for what it's worth. As someone told me one time, if I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. This is my opinion, my humble but most accurate opinion. That Abraham would never have been in a position to offer his son had he not taken the steps of obedience at the beginning. Each step along the way was an obedience test. I was pastoring a church years ago, and in one of the first churches I pastored, and I preached on Abraham, and a young man came to me, and he said, he was so fired up, he said, I want the faith of Abraham. I said, okay, cool. I said, here's what you got to get ready for. A life of sacrifice and sacrificing things, even in your own family. I said, here's what you got to get ready for, a journey that you don't know where you're going. a journey that will lead you at some point to take your son and offer him as a burnt offering on the altar. So you want the faith of Abraham? Great. Don't tell me, tell God, and be ready. And be ready for what's coming next. See, we read all that and we say, boy, isn't that wonderful? Man, he just read some books and went to a couple of seminars, and now look at him. No, it didn't work that way. It was a test every step of the way. Somebody told me one time, you don't flunk God's test. You just get to take them over again. Abraham, Noah. Let me give you a couple more. You okay? I love this quote right in the middle of all this. Leaders think and talk about solutions. Followers think and talk about problems. Joseph became a next level leader when he endured in spite of his circumstances. You know the story of Joseph, probably written about more than anybody, of course. More books, more sermons. Go to Genesis 37 and begin the story of Joseph, and you'll see he started out great. Maybe a little impetuous with the dream thing, telling his brothers. Basically, I can almost hear him saying, now let me interpret that for you. Now one day, according to that dream, you're going to bow down and worship me. The brothers didn't take that kindly. Let's kill him, they said. Let's blot out his vision, they said. Let's eliminate him, they said. And finally, one of them spoke up and said, you know, we really shouldn't kill him, but let's just throw him in a pit. Put blood on the coat that his father gave him, which represented the anointing. Strip him of that. Put him in a dark pit. Take it back. Convince Daddy that he's dead, and then we can sell him. See, God had a plan for Joseph, but I'm sure Joseph didn't count on the plan, including a pit. And then the Midianites come by and they say, what is that? They said, well, that's a guy down there. We'll sell him to you. Okay. So they bought him. How was God going to get him from the pit down to Egypt? Well, I wouldn't have chosen that transportation. I wouldn't have chosen that. A caravan as a slave. Potiphar's house. Falsely accused. You ever been falsely accused? Oh, you hadn't lived, you've been falsely accused, lied about. You hadn't lived. You really hadn't. I pray it never happens if it's not happened to you. I pray nobody ever writes letters about you. I pray nobody ever does any of those things to you because it's a horrible feeling. Falsely accused because he wouldn't cooperate with Potiphar's wife. Accused of rape, one of the worst things a man can consider to be accused of, knowing he didn't do it. Put in prison. The butler and the baker show up because they made the king mad, throw him in prison. You know the story. One didn't make it, one did. One goes back, and before he leaves out of prison, Joseph says, remember me when you talk to the king. He said, I got you, pal. You saved my life. I got you. 2 years. Never said a word. Don't you know, Joseph? 13 years total, waiting. God, what about the dream? What about the dream? What about the dream? What was that about? And finally, all it took was one day for this man to whisper in the king's ear, oh, by the way, I met a guy down in prison that can interpret your dream. Where is he? Oh, he's been down there a while. Get him! Promoted to the second most powerful man in the most powerful economy on the planet in a heartbeat, in a moment of time. All it took was someone to be faithful in spite of the circumstances. All it took was a man that says, you know what? I'm not going to complain. I can't ever find anywhere where Joseph complained. That's a next level leader, and it's hard not to do, is is to learn how to turn circumstances that, I started to say fall on us, but they don't. Sometimes they feel like it. Circumstances we find ourselves in, not to complain. I can't find anywhere where he did. The only thing I find is wherever he was at, he served. That's how you become a next level leader. No matter where you are, you may feel like you're in prison, serve. You may feel like you're in the pit, serve. Because all it takes is one person whispering in someone else's ear your name. Moses was the kind of leader who was willing to speak truth to power. Don't have time to go into all the details about Moses. You know all about it. 40 years in Egypt, learning the ways of Egypt, learning the economic conditions of Egypt, learning how to be a statesman, hearing the call of God, watching his own people being abused, and he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to set my people free, one soldier at a time. Committed murder, buried him in the sand. Maybe they found him because he left his toes sticking up. Don't know. But there's a warrant out for him now. This great leader of the Hebrew people. 40 more years on the backside of nowhere with a PhD in sheepology. But God shows up, you know the story, sends him back, and he says, oh, please don't send me back. There's a warrant out for me. God said, don't worry. I'll take care of it. Oh, I'll send somebody with you because you're telling me you can't talk? Well, of course not. He's been herding sheep for 40 years. He said, I can't talk. You know, I'm stuttering now. So Aaron goes and speaks truth to power, unafraid. And God's raising up next level leaders in this generation right now that's not afraid to stand up and speak up truth. Even though those in power don't want to hear it. And it's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's not a political issue, really. God's the first prime independent in the universe. I'm not so concerned if God's on my side. As Abraham Lincoln said, I'm more concerned that we're on God's side. I want to know where he's going. That's where I want to go. So here's Moses speaking truth to power. A next level leader will understand there are going to be circumstances that God's going to put you in that you may have to speak truth to power. And be ready for the consequences of that. It's not easy to do. Nobody likes to do that as far as I know. Moses. Joshua teaches us that next level leaders lead by example rather than law. A lot of things we could say about this man, again, one of my heroes. But in Joshua 24, listen to this. After leading the people into a new land, Joshua offers the Israelites an option. Here was the option. Serve the God whom they've always served, the one that brought them into the land, or serve the gods of the surrounding lands. But he said, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He said, you decide. You make up your mind who you're going to serve. But as for me and my house, we've already made that decision. See, a next level leader understands, especially the men in the home, that they're the prophet, priest in that home. They provide. They lead in worship. They do things for their families. And now, the greatest generation's dying off. And I can't imagine this generation of young men leading us into Normandy on D-Day. And it's frightening. It's frightening. You know, we're more interested in things like pronouns than we are about leading our families and leading our nation, leading our communities. We're more interested in what to be called. I just read the other day. I mean, we were at the grocery store. I might have mentioned this before. Now it's even worse. Where we live, dozen eggs, $6.89 a dozen. Then I realized what's going on. The chickens and the cows and the milk went up, and the chickens and the cows have formed a union, a trade union, and they colluded together. And then I read just the other day that now we got chickens identifying as roosters. And then some of the roosters are identifying as hens, and there's no eggs being laid because they're too confused. Bless their hearts. What's wrong with the chickens? David. We're about finished before break. Hang on. David, write it down. Faced probably up into that point in his young life the biggest problem you can imagine. This problem had a name. You know who it was, Goliath. Over 9 feet tall. A real bruiser. Every day, morning and night, he challenges down in the valley of Elah. And there's Saul's army all dug in, afraid, scared. Only David was willing to take him on. Here's what I believe about that battle. I believe that battle was over before it started. And by the way, in those days, it was not uncommon. It was called representative combat. You send the best of what you got, we'll send the best of what we got, and the one that survives is the winner, and we take you and your army hostage. That's what that was. Goliath said, send me a man. Come on now, send me somebody. Only David stepped up. And here's what I also believe. That somehow in his heart, when David asked his brothers, what does the man get that takes him on? He wanted to know what the reward was. I can't say I blame him. Somebody told me one time, they said, never take on a Goliath that doesn't promise a reward. He said, what do I get? They said, well, you know, it's posted everywhere, and did you not get the group email? No, I'm not on the list. He said, well, you get tax exemption for you and your family. You get to move into the palace, and you get the king's daughter. Have you seen her? Michael, sharp, really looking good. You get her too. You get all these things if you go out and take care of the problem. So David not only saw the problem, blaspheming God, we know the story, but he said, oh, behind Goliath is my promotion. The next level of promotion is behind him. So he got to go before I can go to the next level. You see, we say, Lord, I want to go to the next level. I want to be a next level leader. I want to be somebody like that. And God says, okay, here's Goliath. Take him on. Because you're not going to get to that level until you eliminate that. Somebody told me one time, they said, you know, God's power and anointing is surrounded by guard dogs called tests, trial, and problems. And God says, oh, you want more? Great. I want you to have more. Let's see how you deal with this, Joseph. Let's see how you deal with this, Moses. Let's see how you deal with this, Joshua, as you lead 2 million people. And you've been a number 2 guy for all these years, and now Moses is dead. Let's see how you do. But Lord, that's not what I asked for. He said, well, that's the only way you're going to get to the next level. So there's David, who was not afraid to face a big problem. Now, I got more. Can I just read these and we'll take a break? John the Baptist was not afraid. He was a next-level leader because they're not afraid to face the religious phonies of his day. Herod, Antipas. His daddy was real mean. Herod said, I'm not as mean as my daddy, but I'm just doing things. So John the Baptist goes in to speak a word to him. He'd been invited to speak at the palace. And he said, it's not lawful to have that woman sitting next to you. That's your brother's wife. That didn't go over well. And so John the Baptist, unafraid to speak to the religious system of his day out in the wilderness. Can you imagine coming to church one Sunday morning and Pastor Donna or Terry stand up and say, what are you doing here, you bunch of snakes? You bunch of whitewashed sepulchres full of dead men's bones. What are you doing in here? Well, that's kind of how John the Baptist was. He didn't read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I mean, He said, what are you doing coming out here? Be baptized. Go baptize your own self. I'm not touching you, filthy thing. He's talking to the most religious people of his day that Jesus had a lot to say to and about. He said, your converts are being made twofold more child of hell than they were until you got a hold of them. That's what religion does, by the way. It binds huge weight around people's necks of rules and regulations. You'll never be what God wants us to be with just rules and regulations. You'll never be holy by following rules. It's an inside job. Now, I'll close with this one and we'll take a break. The greatest problem solver that ever lived and the greatest leader that ever lived. You know his name? Jesus. He was a problem solver. And one of the most powerful images, I'll leave you with this thought, is when he washed his disciples' feet in John 13. And when he finished, he said to them, and I quote, you call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then be Lord and teacher, wash your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. Now, was he establishing an ordinance in the church, as some denominations have said, where you have foot washing every Sunday, all the women over here and all the men over there? I don't think so. Now, if you want to do that, and I've been in some. It's an act of humility. I've been in some. Not a requirement. You know what he's talking about to me? Servant leadership. You want to be the greatest next generation and next level leader? Serve. Serve. The washing of the feet is symbolic to me. I mean, it was a physical act. It was real. I believe that. But for us, it's a symbolic act that says serve one another. Be kind one to another. Lift up one another. But I'm afraid many times we practice what I call Christian cannibalism, where Paul says we bite and devour one another. My brothers, these things ought not so to be. Jesus was a problem solver. And everywhere he went, he faced problems. But everywhere he went, he understood that there was a solution. They're hungry? He said, okay. John 6, I love that story. He said, boys, let's take a test. Y'all gather around now. We want to feed all these people. There's a bunch of them, 5,000 just the men, probably 20,000 total with women and children. They didn't count them in those days. What are we going to do? Philip said, well, you know, keeper of the bag as I am, I'm counting all the money, and I got to tell you, we don't have enough money in the bag in the treasury, you know, in the church. We couldn't buy a Happy Meal for everybody. We don't have any money to do that. He just made, I said, you don't flunk one. Well, he did. I would have loved to have heard him say, well, Jesus, you know all things. You know how to do this. I don't. Obviously, money can't buy enough food. He didn't say that. He said, I calculated. We can't do this. Finally, Andrew says, excuse me, there's a little kid over here that keeps tugging at me, and he's offering his lunch. Can you imagine this little kid? Jesus, listen, don't laugh at me. He's got 5 loaves, two little fishes that his mama packed for him in his little Davy Crockett lunchbox. And he just stands over here and says, would this help? And Jesus said, that's all I need to solve this problem. That's all I need. Tell everybody to sit down. We're going to have lunch now. And he blessed it and broke it. With 12 baskets left over. And one account says, after this event, they get on a boat. They get in the middle of a storm. And John says they forgot to remember, because in the middle of that storm, those 12 baskets left over, one for each apostle, was sloshing up against their knees during the boat, reminding them, you just witnessed a miracle. What is your problem? You just went through a miracle, and this is living proof of that miracle. So why are you so afraid? It took them a while to get to the next level. But we have the benefit of reading and the Holy Spirit within to teach us how to walk through problems and not be consumed by them. Everybody has problems. All God's children do. But the fact of the matter is, you don't have to be a slave to them. You can come to an understanding of how to make them line up and ask God, give me a solution to this problem. I've got stacks of stories. I didn't bring them because I figured you heard them all before about even natural inventions, things that we're now enjoying, came out of the struggle to figure out something. Even the light bulb, for goodness sake. Edison said, I failed thousands of times, but each time I did, and I'm loose quote, but each time I did, it let me know that's one way not to do it until I found the correct way. Now, let's take a break. All right? Are you getting anything yet? Okay, good, because I cry easy if you don't. Yeah, I keep pulling on it. I don't mean to. Yeah, I think my ears are, oh, there you go. I'll tighten it up.
This world and give me. I want Jesus. Oh, I want Jesus. Oh, I want surrender to you alone, and we give you everything. Yes, Lord, we give you everything. Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. To you belongs the glory, the praise of all the world. Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. Blessing and all honor, majesty and all. Jesus, have it all. Oh, Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. To you belongs the glory, the praise of all the world. Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. Blessing and all honor, majesty and all. Oh, Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. To you belongs the glory, the praise of all the world. Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. Oh, blessing and all honor, majesty and all. Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. Oh, Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. To you belongs the praise of all. Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. Blessing and all honor. Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. To you belongs glory, praise of all the world. Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. Blessing and all honor, majesty and all. Jesus, have it all. Jesus, have it all. Jesus had it all. Oh, Jesus had it all. Jesus had. Jesus had. I surrender. I surrender. All to thee, my blessed Savior. From your heart sing, I surrender. Blessed Savior. Oh, I surrender. I surrender. All to thee, blessed Savior. Let it be true, Lord. I surrender. Holding nothing back.
This book actually saved my life. I'll tell the story in a minute.
Giving it all to you, all to thee, my last time say I. Something that's hard for you to surrender this thing. Maybe I've said this before, Lord, I give this to you, but then you tend to take it again and try to change it, try to heal it, try to fix it. But tonight I see you once and for all letting that thing go tonight. Never to pick it up again, but giving it to the only one who can heal. So I surrender, lay it down now. All to thee, my blessed Savior. Lay it down now. I surrender. All to thee, my blessed Savior. All to thee, my blessed Savior.
All right, folks, come on back. Come on. Hello, hello. There we go. Come on back, folks. It's great fellowship. Wonderful. Wonderful. Come on back, everybody. Come on back. Thank you for being here. I told you that earlier. We'll wait till my wife finishes. I love getting her. I love getting her. Now, we got almost enough to buy a tank of gas. So we know who you are. Now, I'm going to tell you something about this little book. This book's traveled all over the world, but more importantly, this book literally saved my life. You know how? Bless you. This book saved my life. The contents of this book that has been used in schools, and it's not very thick, it's been used everywhere. Attitude, the missing ingredient of successful leadership. Joseph, the anatomy of a successful leader. Why leaders fail, but you don't have to. We're going to talk about failure in the morning. You don't want to miss that. And then, oh, by the way, in the last session tomorrow, I'm going to give you 7 keys to take you to next level leadership. I call them golden keys. You know what a key's for? Opening stuff. So I'm going to give you some keys in your hand. I'm going to lay some gold at your feet in the morning, and if you'll take it home with you, it'll change your life, because it changed mine. Mapping your destiny. Beware of the vision stealers. Climbing higher. Integrity, an inside job. Dealing with destiny's detours. And when that which you love has died, when you wake up one morning and you look in the mirror and realize your vision is not happening and you think it's dead. Well, there's some principles in here that'll set you free. So, anyway, I wrote that. I retired so-called from ministry in 2010. And then in 2012, massive heart attack, 5 bypasses, almost died. I did die for about 30 seconds. She saved my life. But they always said, after open heart surgery, there's a period of depression. I didn't believe it. I knew friends that had open heart surgery. I said, they don't look depressed. Of course, I didn't know what they went through. But after I came home from the hospital, nothing. Nothing was going on. Nothing. Except sitting in a chair trying to get through the day with the pain. And eventually, Lori had to go back to work as an ultrasound tech, and we had to get my grandkids to come and stay with me. It was bad, and I went through a black hole. I mean, a real black hole. All my spiritual sons had left. Everybody had just basically walked away, and it was just us and the 2 boys. I mean, it was black. It was black, and it was bad. And so, in October of that year, I get a late night email from someone I hadn't seen in 10 years. We did some conferences together. He wrote me an email and he said, I've got your leadership book and I've dog-eared every page and I've taught out of it. Do you have any more? I thought what he was asking me was a trap, because I've been getting emails from people, and as soon as I respond, I get blasted. And I said, I'm not going to fall for that. I'm not going to respond. To which she said, really? Could be the Lord. I said, nah. I said, all right, I'll tell you what, I'll write him a quick email and say, yeah, I got several boxes. How many do you want of this book? He wrote back right away and said, I don't want to buy the book. I want to buy the rights to the book, and I want to hire you to write more chapters, and we're going to republish it, because that's what I believe in this book so much. Well, again, at a low point in my life, I said, well, I got no other offers. I'm not getting any income. So he made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I sold the rights to that book. Now, I can still sell that one. That's the original. And began writing for him, and that writing is still going on 12 years later. Still going on. Still doing it. I've written 9 books for him. He's made millions of dollars off of me. This is not going out, is it? He's made a lot of money off of me. Somebody said, does that not bother you? Well, maybe, but boy, as long as you spell my name right on the check, I don't care. It does real well. But it's hard work. But that book saved my life. Now, if that's not enough to make you go out there and buy that book, no, I'm just messing with you. Get it if you want it. I don't care. I'll tell you what, it's getting late. I'm going to make you a deal. That's 15. The other one's 15. I'm going to give you both of them for $30. I think I tried that already. It didn't work. Lori will be out there. If you didn't get one, she'll be out there at the table. She'll take your money. All right? Thank you very much. All right. Session 2. Now you can start back there. Session 2. I call this breaking through the stone wall of change. Now, if you want to blow up an organization, just attempt to change the organization without first understanding that it's a stone wall you're facing many times, and you will not only butt your head against that stone wall, but somebody will make sure to plant some dynamite around you to blow you up before you can blow up the organization. Whether it's a church or a business, it doesn't matter. Because I've done these seminars through the years for business organizations, and I tell them, listen, change is not easy unless the leader is willing to change himself or herself. You'll never change an organization unless if you're unwilling to change yourself. Listen to this quote. And by the way, can you see the board? Breaking through the stone wall, the SQ factor. You know what the SQ factor is? Status quo. Keep everything SQ. Keep everything like it was, like it is, and like it always shall be. Listen to this. Unchanged leaders will never be able to change their organization successfully because people do what people see. As a leader, if I'm unwilling to change, how can I expect those in my organization to change? Write this down. Change is a choice. Change is not a choice. How we handle change is. One Middle Eastern mystic said about change, and I quote, I was a revolutionary when I was a young man, and all my prayer to God was, Lord, give me the energy to change the world. As I approached middle age and realized that my life was half gone without my changing a single soul, I changed my prayer to, Lord, give me the grace to change all those who come in contact with me, just my family, friends, and I shall be satisfied. Now that I'm an old man and my days are numbered, I've begun to see how foolish I've been. My one prayer now is, Lord, give me the grace to change myself. If I'd prayed that prayer from the beginning, I would have not wasted my life. Change brings growth. That statement can only be true if if my attitude is right. I've discovered something. As I've gotten older, I'm more resistant to change. Fact of life. When I was a young man starting out in ministry, 22, 23 years old, fresh out of the Army, fresh back from a few years of serving a tour in Vietnam, rough around the edges, and when God called me, I said the angels bowed and wept, and the flags of heaven flew at half-mast because they said there's no way God's going to call that guy into ministry. But I was willing to change anything and everything. I like change. Let's change the chairs. Let's change the color of the paint. Let's buy a new carpet. Let's rearrange the flowers at the front. Let's just change stuff. The first church, I don't think I told this here, and if I have, well, I'll tell it again. First church I served in a little town in Alabama. Little country church, really kind of outside of town, and I was young, to say the least, and totally inexperienced, didn't have a clue, except I wanted to preach the Bible. And I did. But when I walked the first time up on the platform, I noticed they had an ornate, probably 16th century, it seemed like, pulpit. Huge, massive. Did I tell this here? And I thought, well, it's too tall because it hit me about right here. With they had the old-fashioned lamps up on the pulpit. So with the lamp hit me about right here. You couldn't tell anybody was speaking unless I stepped out and did that. Really. So I would walk up to the pulpit, it would hit me. I'm not making this up. It was extremely tall pulpit. And with the light, it just bothered me. So I was there about a month or so, and I had won an old boy to the Lord. I went out every day knocking on doors and soul winning. And I won an old boy, old drunkard down the road from the church, and I'd knocked on his door one night and, come on in. Are you the new preacher? Yes, sir. I won him to Jesus that night. Well, he started coming. He was fired up. And I got with him one Sunday night, and I said, hey, you got a saw? Oh, yes. He said, yeah, preacher, what are you wanting to cut up? He thought we was going to go down to the bar and cut up some people. I said, no, bring your circle saw if you got one, Wednesday night. He did. So Wednesday night after the Bible study, the little prayer meeting, where they pray for everybody in town on the prayer list, and the little choir goes back up, maybe 25 or 30 of them. They go back up with the choir director. That's what it's called in a Baptist church. They go up here to practice for Sunday while he takes that saw, and I said, flip that thing over. And he flipped it over on its side. And I said, give me about a foot off the bottom of that. And so here he goes. Sawdust flying everywhere, piling up on the floor. I look around and the choir, their eyes are this big and they've got that look they had just seen a ghost. They're like, oh my God, what is he doing? And he put it back up and said, nah, it's still too tall. Pulled it back. Give me about 6 more inches. We cut it off. And what I didn't know that I found out the hard way is that somebody up there's granddaddy had handmade that. Oh, yeah. Oh, Jesus help me. Well, you'd have thought I was telling everybody to take the mark of the beast. You'd have thought I had big vats of poison Kool-Aid for everybody. Oh, it was bad. Oh, it was bad. I didn't stay but about a year. I moved on pretty quick. No, it was bad. That was stupid. That was dumb. There's 1,000 different ways to go about that if you want to change something. But I didn't know except take action and let's do something about it. Yeah. Now, change brings growth, but with the right attitude. To break through the stone wall, it takes the right attitude because there's an SQ factor embedded in that wall that says you're not going to institute change here. And again, from my former days of a denominational pastor, not anymore, that was the first 21 years, the last 30-something years, not. But I learned something. There's a way to institute change, and there's a way not to. If you're willing to do some things that will not blow yourself up in the process, like cutting that pulpit off. See, I almost blew my ministry up by doing something really dumb. What's the biggest roadblock to change? Of breaking through this, whether you're the main leader, whether you're in a supervisory position or a main leader of a church, what is the number one word that I could describe that stops this from happening? One word. See if you can see it. Fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of what are you doing? Fear. Just pure fear. And I'm going to give you some of the reasons why we instill that fear in people. Fear. I've discovered that people are either going through a change now, they just came through one, or they're about to go through one. So you better learn to deal with change. You say, I don't like change. I understand it, but it's happening. It's happening in our life. At my age, I didn't think it would happen again, any radical change, but it may happen. Don't know, but I've adjusted my attitude to adjust the sails of my spirit so the wind of the Spirit of God can blow and take me in the direction He wants me to go. And it's not easy to do. There are two extremes when it comes to change. One, every time a new wind blows, I'm ready to change without considering anything else of the consequences, the cost, or anything else. Let's just change it all up. Well, I learned the hard way that's not the best way to go about it. And then secondly, I will never change no matter what. And we allow fear to stop us. Fear has a vicious cycle. Write it down. And by the way, while you're getting ready to write, fear is interest paid on a debt you may not owe. You know that. False evidence appearing real. You know all this. Fear breeds inaction. Write it down. Inaction leads to lack of experience. Lack of experience fosters ignorance, and ignorance leads to fear. Did you get that? Let me say it again. Fear breeds inaction. You're paralyzed by fear. So we won't change anything, I'm afraid. Inaction leads to lack of experience. You'll never have any experience if you never do anything. Lack of experience fosters ignorance, and ignorance breeds fear. It's a cycle. Now, you can ignore fear, you can hope it goes away, or you can face it and overcome it. Now, let me give you quickly, because we're going to run close on time. I told you I'd get you there by 9, and I'm going to. Write these down quickly. 10 reasons why we resist change. 10 reasons why. You ready? Are you ready? Number 1, I didn't do it. People feel they need to have ownership of an idea, and when they don't, they usually resist it. I know I do. Even if the change is in their best interest. A wise next-level leader will allow those around them input and be a part of the change process. If I'm the one initiating the change, I'm all for it. If someone else is imposing the change on me, I might be against it. I didn't do it. Number 2, you love this one, just because. Well, why don't you want to change? Just because. Like a little kid. Why do you want that? Just because. Well, you're going to have to give me more than that. Why do you want to go over there? Just because. It's always just because. Well, that attitude goes into an organization that says, we don't want to change. Well, why not? Just because. I don't have to give you a reason. I'm just against it. One of the most difficult things to do is unlearn old habits. Some people resist change just because. Number 3, what's out there? Did you know that most people are more comfortable with old problems than new solutions? Some people are open to change as long as it doesn't inconvenience them or cost them anything. Moving in change is like moving in uncharted waters that produces fear. What's out there? We don't know. But if you'll stay with it long enough and we introduce the change in the proper way, we can inform you what's out there. But some people are against it just because they don't know what's the next step. Number 4, I call it muddy waters. When the purpose of the change is unclear, and that's on us, by the way, if we're the main leader, the waters of the organization will become muddy, and secondhand information and rumor will be the order of the day. Did you hear they're changing the church time from 10 o'clock to 10:30 at night. Did you hear? Listen, I've heard it all. Did you hear? They're taking all the chairs out and they're going to make everybody stand for worship. No chairs. By the way, part 2 of that was they're buying new chairs, so they have to take the old chairs out. But see, that's how secondhand information starts spreading around. So your phone starts ringing. Why are you taking the chairs out of the church? Why are you doing that? Well, we got to move those out to move the new ones in. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, you didn't listen. Now did you? Muddy waters. And all it takes is one or two voices to muddy up the water. And before you can explain what's going on, they've got rumors going everywhere about things that are not true. Number 5. Why do we resist change? Fear of failure. A leadership expert by the name of Elbert Hubbard, not L. Ron Hubbard, Elbert. The greatest mistake a person can make is to be afraid of making one. I love this quote by a former San Diego Padres pitcher who said, if you first don't succeed, failure may be your thing. I don't believe that, but it's funny. There are too many people who feel like, well, I tried it, it didn't work, so I guess failure is my thing. Well, maybe it's time to step back, reevaluate, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but reevaluate what you've done to create the change and to create muddy waters and to create confusion and try to fix it. I had a thing in our church that I planted in 1990, 91 that I stayed with for over 20 years. And I had a thing, I told them at the very beginning. I said, listen, when I miss it, I'll tell you. I'll be the first to admit it. And I had to do it more than once. Stand before a large crowd of people and say, folks, I just want you to know I missed it. I thought we were headed in the right direction or whatever the decision was, but I just missed it. I just want you to know that you look at leaders as non-humans, but we're not. We have issues and failures, and we have problems just like everybody else, and sometimes because of the position we're in, we have more that are magnified than others, simply because it's easy to shoot at the leader. It's easy to blame the leader when things go wrong. Fear of failure. Number 6, negative thinking. The epitaph on a negative person's headstone should read, I expected this. Or one I saw from a hypochondriac that said, I told you I was sick. A negative thinker will find disappointment in anything they do and anything you do. Much like the sign in an office building, I wrote it down. Don't look, you might see. Don't listen, you might hear. Don't think, you might learn. Don't make a decision, you might be wrong. Don't run, you might fall. Don't live, you might die. Don't change, you might grow. Number 7. I love this one. Why do we resist change? I didn't like you anyway. People will view change according to the way they view the leader. That's how you boil it down. And sometimes when you say, well, why are you so resistant? And if they'd be honest, and most people won't, tell you, I don't like your leadership style and I don't like you. When followers don't respect their leaders, their feelings toward them will not allow them to look to change in a positive way. And on a leadership point, from us, it's hard to lead people that you don't first love and care about. If we only view people in the church that sit in our chairs and give their money and show up when we tell them to, without understanding their problems and their challenges that they go through and the things in life that they have to deal with, to say, listen, and you know the old saying, I don't care how much you know till I know how much you care. Well, it's true. It's true. And sometimes, and we're living in an age that's been going on for a while, and it's not new, but We're living in an age of superstars in the ministry that have to be chauffeured around to their private jets, and there's nothing wrong with it. Have at it. Have two of them. Give me one. I got nothing against any of that. But they get to that level of saying, don't touch me. I'm special. I'm highly anointed. Oh, and by the way, you're not. So if you want something, you got to come to me to get it. Really? Really? I don't think so. I think the ministry has been prostituted so much by those that are so greedy, who feel like the only thing they need to do is just show up. Oh, at the last minute, by the way, with their entourage. You know, I've been in those meetings. I better stop now. Number 8. How would this affect me personally? That's the 8th reason people don't want to change. When change is in the air, the first question on everyone's mind is, how would this change affect me and my family? And if I'm not sure the change is going to produce positive effects, I might be more inclined to resist. If I can see not only the long-term benefits, but short-term results, I might be more inclined to face change with a positive attitude. How will this affect me personally? As long as it's just affecting you, I don't mind it at all. But if it inconveniences me in any way, I got a problem. Number 9, my favorite all time. We've never done it that way before. We've never done it that way before. I've been around people who spend more time talking about the past than the present and the future. How many people does it take to change a light bulb? 4. 1 to change the bulb, and 3 to reminisce about how good the old light bulb was. Oh, I remember those glory days, those good old days. Oh, those days were wonderful. If we could just go back, we can't. We can't go back. And I'll tell you this. What God's doing on the earth right now and about to explode on this earth has never been seen before. It's going to make the day of Pentecost look like a Sunday school picnic. It's happening right now. Now, you'd never know that if you walk outside and get in the airwaves of what they're trying to pump into your brain. But I'm telling you now, it's happening everywhere. Revival and the power of God is moving, if you don't mind me getting into the spiritual stuff. I can't help it. We're in a church, and I'm a minister, and I can't help it. That's just who I am. I'm trying to give you some practical things, but I'm telling you, I know what I know. God is moving on the earth, and change is afoot. And church as usual is about to come to a close. It really is. The curtain's coming down on church as usual. And God is going to walk into churches. He said, I'll pour out my spirit on all flesh. That's Baptist flesh, Methodist flesh, Presbyterian flesh, Assembly of God flesh, Pentecostal flesh. He said, I'll pour out my spirit on all flesh. He is no respecter of any group or person. Whoever's hungry enough and thirsty enough for it, he says, I will show up. Believe it. But we've never done it that way before. I've heard it. I've heard it more than once. That's just not how we do things around here. Really? Okay, well, how's that been working out for you? Been working out pretty good, has it? Number 10, I call it narrow-mindedness. 1,600 people, this was a long time ago, it's probably more now, belong to the Flat Earth Society of America. Even now, when the president of the Flat Earth Society was in grade school, he said, I saw a globe, quote, I saw a globe in school. I didn't accept it then. I don't accept it now. As the old man said one day, yes, and I've been again everything all the time. when asked by a reporter, he said, "You're 100 years old," as the old man was sitting on the porch. And the reporter said, "I bet you've seen a lot of change in your lifetime." He said, "Yeah, and I've been against every one of them." Now, we only have 11 minutes. If you'll come back in the morning, I'm going to lead off in the morning. We're going to get to everything, I promise. But I'm going to give you some positive ways to institute change. That was the negative. I have to give you the negative first. But I'm going to give you about 7 or 8 principles that will help how to institute a positive change in an organization, a ministry, or a home group, whatever it is. I'm going to give you some that maybe you can take home with you and maybe help. Because you don't have to blow people up to change them. You don't have to dig them up to change them. Just learn some principles. And these principles, I think, will help. Let me just give you an example. The first one is called the tie that binds. It's called trust. If people trust you, they'll follow you. But if they don't trust you, hey, you can try to institute the most glamorous, wonderful change in the world, but they don't trust you. So it starts with trusting and building trust with people. Putting chips in the trust bank that when you need to withdraw those chips out to institute some sort of change in the ministry or organization, people say, well, you know what? I trust her. I trust him. That they're doing what's best for the organization. So that's one. That's the first one. And we'll talk more in the morning. We're going to start out with it. You don't want to miss it because we're going to go from that to another teaching that I do called Facing Failure. Failure is not final. It's not fatal. Only if you allow it. Rick Pitino, the great basketball coach, said, failure is like fertilizer. It helps me to grow. Make sense? So we're going to meet right here at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'll write some more left-handed on the board, I promise. Now, before we go, we got 8 minutes. I told you we'd be through on time. In the morning, we'll start on time, and we'll be finished on time, and we'll take breaks. Are you okay with that? You good? Now, tell me something before we go. This helps me. Tell me something that the Lord spoke to you or something that you will take home with you tonight from what you've heard. I did all the talking. Tell me one thing, something, anything, please. You want me to talk about the book again? I will. Yes, sir. Yes.
Fear breeds inaction, which brings the lack of experience, which brings ignorance, which brings fear.
Cycle. God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Yes.
I put it on Facebook. God's plan for you might include a pit.
And that's a change for sure. It might include a pit. All right, somebody else. Come on, talk to me a minute. Yes, sir. We're among friends.
Every problem has a resolution.
Yeah, I believe that. And if it doesn't, it becomes a fact of life. Yes.
Line your problems up single file.
Yeah. Line them up single file. I don't always do what I try to. I don't always do it right, but I try to. And when you're faced with a multiplicity of problems, make them line up this way so you can only see the biggest one first. Deal with that giant, and the rest of them will fall pretty quick. All right, somebody else, talk to me. You can take us offline, by the way, because I'm sure they can't hear. Make